The first thing I heard was my name said like a joke. Not loud enough to start a fight. Just loud enough to make the people closest to my dad chuckle into their drinks. I walked into the private dining room with my shoulders straight and my face calm, the way you do when you've learned that showing hurt only feeds them. Gold-trimmed mirrors. White tablecloths. A long table packed with my relatives dressed like they were attending an award show. And there I was, Olivia Brooks, sliding into a seat near the end like an afterthought they still wanted in the photo. My cousin Kelsey sat in the middle like a queen on her throne, ring flashing under the lights. Her fiancé, Mason Reed, stood behind her chair with his hands on the backrest, smiling as everyone praised him for saving her from dating losers. "Can you believe it?" Kelsey's mom, Denise, said, loud enough for the entire table. "Our girl finally found a man with standards." Kelsey giggled. "Mom, stop." But she didn't look like she wanted her to stop. My dad, Richard Brooks, lifted his glass and smiled that tight smile he always used when he was about to throw a punch with words. "Tonight's about winners," he said. "And about finally doing things the right way." His eyes flicked toward me, 1 second, then away again, like I was an unpleasant smell he decided to ignore. I sat down and placed my purse on my lap. I didn't bring anything flashy. No designer bag. No loud jewelry. No look-at-me outfit. That was my family's favorite excuse. If I showed up simple, I was behind. If I showed up polished, I was trying too hard. So I chose neutral.
Calm.
Unbothered. A waiter poured water. My Aunt Carla leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice sweet like syrup. "Olivia, honey, are you still doing that little thing?" I blinked. "Which thing?" She laughed like it was cute that I didn't know my place. "The job hopping. The hustle. The whatever you call it." Across the table, Kelsey's brother Tyler smirked. "She's probably finding herself again." A few people laughed. The kind of laugh that's socially acceptable but still cruel. My mom, Sharon, looked down at her plate like she didn't hear it. She never defended me. Not once. She would text me later with something like, "Try not to take it personally." Like humiliation was weather. I lifted my water and took a slow sip. "I'm working," I said, and left it at that. My dad snorted. "Working doesn't mean much if you're still a failure." The word hit the table like a dropped fork. Even the waiter paused for half a beat. Kelsey widened her eyes, pretending she was shocked, but she looked satisfied too. Like this insult made the celebration feel more complete. I nodded once, like he'd just told me the time. Okay. That made him irritated. They hated when I stayed calm. Calm meant I wasn't playing my assigned role. Denise clapped her hands. "Anyway, tonight is about love. Kelsey and Mason are proof that when you aim high, you get high." Kelsey leaned into Mason's side, and he kissed her cheek. Everyone sighed dramatically. I didn't. Because I wasn't there to sigh. I was there because Kelsey's invitation had been a trap. One more night where they could point at me and say, "See? This is what happens when you don't listen to us." They'd been doing it for years. When I chose a path they didn't understand, they called it reckless. When I left a job that was crushing me, they called it lazy. When I stopped begging for their approval, they called it arrogant. I had learned to survive by going quiet. But quiet didn't mean weak. Dinner started. Plates landed. Silverware clicked. Conversation rolled like a wave around the table, skipping over me except when they wanted to throw another little jab. "So, Olivia," Tyler said again, cutting his steak, "how does it feel watching Kelsey finally get the life you couldn't?" Kelsey covered her mouth like she was embarrassed, but her eyes watched me closely, waiting for a reaction. Waiting for me to crack. I smiled slightly. "Feels like I'm at dinner." That was it. Tyler's grin faltered. My dad leaned back, annoyed. Always with the attitude. Then Mason's father, an older man with a country club voice, raised his glass. To Kelsey. And to the man who recognized her value. Everyone cheered. Glasses clinked. Mason stood up next, confident. He adjusted his jacket, looking around the table like he was used to attention. "I just want to say," he began, smiling at Kelsey. "Meeting Kelsey felt like a door opening. Kelsey squeezed his hand, glowing. I knew right away, Mason continued. She came from a family that understands what matters. My dad sat taller, proud like he'd earned that compliment. Mason's eyes traveled along the table as he thanked the relatives, praised Denise, joked with Tyler. And then his gaze moved toward the end. Toward me. He paused. Not a casual pause. A pause like his brain had hit a wall. His smile faded a fraction. His eyebrows pulled together. He stared at me like I was a name he'd read somewhere important. Kelsey felt it. She turned her head. Mason. He didn't answer. He took one step closer to our end of the table, still holding his glass, looking directly at me now. The room quieted, not fully, but enough that it felt like the air tightened. Mason leaned down toward Kelsey, like he was about to whisper something romantic. But his eyes stayed on my face. And in a voice that wasn't playful at all, he murmured, "Wait, I know you." Everything stopped. Forks hovered. Smiles froze. Even Kelsey's glowing expression cracked. My dad's hand tightened around his glass. My mom finally looked up. I didn't move. I didn't blink fast. I didn't flinch. I just met Mason's gaze and said softly, "Yeah, you do." And that was the moment my dad couldn't look at me anymore, because whatever Mason remembered, it wasn't going to make my family feel powerful. It was going to do the opposite. Mason straightened slowly, like he'd just realized every person in the room was watching him. "I met you before," he said, clearer now. "A while back." Kelsey laughed, sharp and nervous. "Babe, you're mixing her up with someone else." "No," Mason replied. "I'm not." That single sentence landed heavier than any insult my family had ever thrown at me. My dad cleared his throat. "I'm sure there's some confusion. She's family, but nothing," Mason said, cutting him off without even looking at him. That was new. No one ever cut my dad off. Mason's attention came back to me. "You were running operations that night." Calm. Sharp. "You solved a mess no one else could." The table went silent in a different way now, not curious silence, but alert silence. Kelsey's smile twitched. "What night?" Mason hesitated, then spoke carefully. "A corporate crisis dinner in Chicago. Private. No phones. No press." My Aunt Denise frowned. "Olivia doesn't do corporate anything." I finally set my fork down. I didn't use my last name then. Every head snapped toward me. My dad stared like I'd spoken another language. "What are you talking about?" Mason nodded slowly. "You were consulting under a different name." Kelsey turned to me fully now. "Consulting." She laughed again, louder this time. "Okay, this is getting embarrassing." "For who?" Mason asked. The question hung there, sharp and uncomfortable. He turned to the table. That night, our company was about to lose a 7-figure contract. Everything was falling apart. Lawyers panicking. Executives blaming each other. He looked back at me, and then she walked in. My mom's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass and set it back down. "She didn't talk much," Mason continued. "But when she did, everyone listened. She rewrote the entire negotiation strategy in under an hour." "That's not possible," my dad snapped. "She's never held a real position in her life." Mason finally looked at him then. And the look wasn't polite. "I'm sorry," Mason said evenly. "But that's not true." My dad's face reddened. "You don't know my daughter." Mason's jaw tightened. "I know she saved my company." The word company echoed like it had weight. Kelsey stood up halfway from her chair. "Mason, stop. You're ruining the night." He didn't even glance at her. "She turned down a full-time role," Mason said, eyes still on me. "Said she preferred to build quietly." My cousin Tyler scoffed. "Build what? She can't even." Mason cut him off with a raised hand. "She owns 20% of the firm she advised us through." Silence. Not a breath. Not a fork. Nothing. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and slow. My dad stared at me like I'd just betrayed him by existing. "That's a lie," Denise whispered. I shrugged lightly. "You never ask." Kelsey's face drained of color. Mason, is this some kind of joke? He finally turned to her. Why would I joke about this? She opened her mouth, then closed it. My mom's voice came out small. Olivia, is this true? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something loosen in my chest. Yes. My dad pushed his chair back, slightly. Why wouldn't you tell us? I smiled, not sweet, not cruel, just honest. Because every time I try to talk about my work, you called it a phase. Mason exhaled slowly. When I walked in tonight and saw her name on the place card, I thought I was imagining things. Kelsey sat back down hard. You recognized her and didn't tell me? Mason shook his head. I didn't realize it was her at first. Her voice dropped. So, you've been praising her this entire time? No, he said calmly. I've been telling the truth. My dad's jaw clenched. So what? You expect us to apologize now? I tilted my head. I don't expect anything. And that was the truth. I hadn't come for apologies. I hadn't come to prove anything. But sometimes the truth shows up anyway. Mason picked up his glass again, but he didn't raise it this time. I just wanted to say, it's good to see you again, Olivia. I nodded. Likewise. Kelsey stared between us, panic creeping into her expression. You never told me you knew her. He met her gaze. You never mentioned her. Her lips parted, then pressed together. Around the table, the mood had shifted completely. The laughter was gone. The confidence had leaked out like air from a punctured balloon. My dad stared at his hands. For the first time in my life, no one was laughing at me. And for the first time, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of my choice. Because revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just had to be undeniable. And the night was far from over. The room didn't recover. People tried, small coughs, shifting chairs, someone pretending to check their phone, but the energy was gone. The celebration had turned into something brittle, like glass after a crack. Kelsey broke first. So, she said, forcing a laugh, this is impressive, I guess. But let's not pretend Olivia planned any of this. I looked up at her. You're right. I didn't. That seemed to unsettle her more than if I'd argued. Mason set his napkin down carefully. Actually, you did plan something. You just didn't plan for an audience like this. My dad stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Mason glanced at me, a silent question. I nodded once. I came tonight because Kelsey invited me, I said. And because I was tired of hiding. My mom's eyes filled, though she didn't say anything. I didn't tell you about my work, I continued, because every time I tried to be honest about who I was becoming, you told me I was wasting my life. My dad's voice came out rough. We were trying to protect you. No, I said calmly. You were trying to control the version of me that made you comfortable. That landed. Kelsey crossed her arms. So, what? This is your big moment? You embarrass us at my engagement dinner? I shook my head. I didn't embarrass anyone. I answered a question. Mason added quietly, and I recognized someone who earned respect. The word earned hung heavy in the air. My Uncle Grant muttered, This is getting awkward. Yes, I said. It is. And for once, the awkwardness wasn't mine to carry. My dad stood abruptly. His chair scraped loudly, drawing everyone's attention. So, what do you want? He demanded. A round of applause? An apology. I met his eyes steadily. I want you to stop calling me a failure. The room went still again. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His confidence faltered, just a little. I built something, I said. Without your money. Without your connections. Without your approval. Mason nodded. She did. And she did it well. Kelsey's voice cracked. You're choosing her side now? Mason looked at her, truly looked. I'm choosing the truth. That was the moment I saw it. The fear in her eyes. Not jealousy. Not anger. Fear. Because for the first time, she wasn't the most impressive person in the room. My mom finally spoke. Olivia, why didn't you let us help? I answered honestly. Because help always came with conditions. Silence answered me. Mason reached for his jacket. I think it's time we go, he said to Kelsey. Her head snapped up. Go? The dinner's not over. It is for me, he replied. Gasps rippled through the table. Kelsey stood too, voice shaking. You can't just leave. Mason turned to me before responding. Olivia, can I say one more thing? Of course. He faced the table. The firm she helped build is expanding. Quietly. Strategically. And I wouldn't be surprised if you hear her name again very soon. My dad looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see disappointment in his eyes. I saw uncertainty. I picked up my purse and stood. I'm leaving too. My mom rose halfway. Wait. I paused. Yes. She swallowed. I'm proud of you. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. I nodded once. Thank you. As I walked toward the door, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to. Behind me, voices buzzed, confused, shaken, recalibrating. Ahead of me was quiet, and for the first time, it felt like peace. The kind that comes right before everything changes. The valet handed me my keys, and for a moment, I just stood there under the soft glow of the restaurant lights. I expected my hands to shake. They didn't. I expected the old ache, the one that always followed family gatherings, to crawl at my chest. It didn't. Instead, there was calm, real calm, the kind I'd earned. Behind me, the door opened. Olivia. I turned. It was my dad. Richard Brooks stood there without the crowd, without the table, without his audience. He looked smaller somehow. Not weaker, just human. I didn't know, he said. I waited. I didn't know what you were doing, he repeated, like saying it twice might fix something. I tried to tell you, I said gently. He nodded. I know. I didn't listen. That admission was heavier than any apology. You don't have to explain yourself anymore, he said. Not to us. I studied his face, searching for the familiar defensiveness. It wasn't there. Just regret. I'm not asking for permission, I said. I stopped needing that a long time ago. A sad smile tugged at his mouth. I see that now. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars rolled in and out. Laughter floated from somewhere down the street, detached from our moment. I was wrong to call you a failure, he said finally. You're not. I exhaled slowly. I know. And that was the difference. He stepped back, giving me space instead of taking it. Your mother wants to talk. Someday. When you're ready. I'll decide, I replied. He nodded again. No argument. Inside the restaurant, voices rose briefly. Kelsey, emotional. Denise, sharp. Someone else trying to smooth things over. The old chaos I used to drown in. Not tonight. Mason stepped out next, adjusting his jacket. You handled that better than most people would. I've had practice, I said. He smiled. I meant what I said. You're building something special. Thank you. He hesitated. If you ever want to collaborate again, I'll reach out, I said, and I meant it. He nodded once and returned inside. I got into my car and started the engine. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. I should have protected you. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, then typed back slowly. I'm okay now. And I was. The next morning, sunlight streamed into my apartment. Clean, quiet mine. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the city wake up. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. Subject line, strategic expansion, final approval. I smiled. Weeks later, the announcement went public. The firm I'd helped build, no flashy press, no dramatic headlines, secured a major partnership. My name appeared once, briefly, in a trade article. That was enough. My dad called after that. Not to brag. Not to lecture. Just to ask how I was. Kelsey never did reach out. And that was fine. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. At the next family gathering, months later, the tone was different. Quieter. Careful. Respectful. I wasn't introduced as the one still figuring things out. I was introduced by my name. By then, I didn't need their approval. But I accepted the change anyway, not as revenge, but as closure. Because the best ending wasn't watching them fall. It was watching myself rise, steady, confident, and finally free.